political parties, and we're going to start talking about third parties, which we said, look, these third parties, they don't necessarily have a chance to win elections at the federal level, but they do have the ability to impact in our system, even though it's a two-party system. Okay, and we just mentioned this. Do third parties have a chance to win elections at the federal level? And usually the answer is no. Okay, they're not going to win at the federal level. However, they do sometimes win races at the state and local levels, and we'll show you that here in a few minutes. Okay, now, do they have a chance of winning at the federal level? The answer is no. But there are roles for third parties to play. And one of the important roles, and look, man, this is not something that's a good thing. It's not like a contribution to the system, but third parties can play the spoiler in elections. All right, especially presidential elections. You've seen in the last, in the last 20 years, you've had some of the closest presidential elections you've had in American history. Okay, and sometimes third-party candidates can overall mess with the results. Now, we'll get to how they do that here in a second. Let's talk about actual roles that third parties have. All right. Um, Third parties, the roles of these, other than being a spoiler in an election, one of the things they do is they provide an outlet for people who do not fit into the major parties. Okay? When somebody feels like they don't really fit under the umbrella of Democrats or Republicans, third parties give them a place where they can work with like minded people and talk about policy ideas and change that really interests them. All right. And that's happened, that I think a lot of you all probably feel that way. Maybe you don't necessarily identify with Democrats or Republicans. Okay. So third parties are an outlet for people who don't fit under one of the umbrellas. Right. It gives them a way to participate in the political process. All right. So we got spoiler role that it gives people an outlet if they don't fit in the major parties. Okay. Third parties also, all right. Third parties also will bring up issues the two parties are afraid to bring up or that they don't want to talk about. One of the things they're good at is forcing the two major parties to address an issue. And there's probably no better example of that than the Green Party becoming the voice for the environment. In the late 80s and early 90s, there were some things about the environment that we were learning that could potentially have been catastrophic. The ozone layer, we found out that the ozone layer around the Earth was being depleted because of chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs. And so people had to, make some changes. And the Green Party, because they would not stop talking about the environmental issues, and they did such a good job of making people aware of what's going on, Democrats and Republicans had to figure out where they stood on the environment because they were losing ground to the Green Party. Right now, ultimately, the Democrats kind of picked up on those ideas, but they forced them to actually take a stance, to take a position on that. Okay. Third parties, this goes along with what we were talking about a second ago with providing a place for people who don't feel like they like fit into one of the two major parties, but it also provides a voice for people who are on the fringes politically. Okay, and what we mean by the fringes are people who would otherwise be considered radical. People forget, for example, there's still a communist party in the United States, right? And they're extremely small. Like nationwide, I think they got a couple thousand members, which is really nothing. But at least people who are on the radical edges have a place where they can work with like minded people and try to come up with policy issues. Like, for example, the third parties that we'll mention today, for instance, they are not at all examples of what we would call radicals. Don't think that libertarians or Green Party people are really that radical, all right? But I'll show you too that we'll look at a list of third parties in the United States. There are way more than what you would think, all right? So it's a voice for fringe people who have ideological views that are way out of the mainstream, okay? Now, third parties, what happens to most third parties? Like, what's the result of these? All right, do most third parties ever really make a difference? Do they win elections at all at the state and local level? And the answer is most third parties are eventually just going to disappear. Okay, Most third parties are going to dissolve. Now, the question you should be asking is, why do they dissolve? Why do these third parties die out? All right. And the answer is probably a lot more simple than what you would think. Okay. Third parties tend to die out when one of the two major parties start to take their issues away. Okay. And once again, let's go back to the Green Party as an example. All right. When the Green Party forced Democrats and Republicans to take a stance on the environmental issues, they were pleased with that. Okay. But they also didn't realize that they were kind of signing their own death warrant. All right. And here's why. Once the Democrats became kind of the protectors of the environment over the Republican Party, it's not that Republicans hate the environment, but Democrats are definitely friendlier to the environmental views of the Green Party people than Republicans. So if you're an environmentalist, you have two choices, okay? Would you rather participate in the Democratic Party, who likes the environment, or would you rather participate in the Green Party, who also likes the environment? And people will gravitate towards the Democratic Party because they have candidates who can win. All right, remember that two-party system is pretty powerful. And so you're like, hey, I would rather vote for Joe Biden, who is a guy who says he's friendly to the environment, versus the Green Party candidate, which most people wouldn't even know who it was, because Joe Biden has a chance of winning. And they look at him as a far better alternative for the environment than somebody like Donald Trump. Okay, so these third parties, they usually end up dissolving. Okay, because one of the two major parties takes on their issues. Right now, there's different types of third parties. Okay, some third parties are what we call splinter parties. All right, a splinter party is one that breaks off from an already existing party. Okay, so like for example, let's say the really super conservatives decided they didn't like the Republican Party anymore, and they wanted to break off and form their own party, and they just call it the Conservative Party. Right? That would be an example of a splinter party. It's a party that breaks away and forms their own particular movement. Okay, there are also parties, another type of party that is centered around an individual. All right, there's another type of party that's centered around an individual. A good example of this would be the Bull Moose Party in the early 1900s. If you don't know, that was centered around Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, and there are a couple other examples, historical examples too, but that's probably the best one. All right, and then the other type of third parties is that there are parties that center around ideologies or beliefs. Okay, like the Green Party, right? They're centered around ideas. They are not built around a single person. Okay, now between parties that are centered around an ideology or parties that are centered around a person, which ones do you think last longer, are more likely to have staying power? The answer is it's parties that are based around an ideology. And the reason why is that individuals die. Like when Teddy Roosevelt retires from politics and dies, the Bull Moose Party, what do they have left? They were built around a person. And when that person's gone, there's no identity anymore. The Green Party is centered around environmental ideas, nonviolence, peaceful approach to diplomacy. And so they look at it as this: hey, no matter who dies, the ideas live on. You can't kill an idea. Right? The same is true of the Libertarian Party. They're built around ideas. Right? Now, where do they have success? We mentioned that they have success in winning elections at state and local levels. Right? State and local levels, they're going to win some elections. They do fairly well in that particular instance. Well, I don't want to say they do well, but they do okay. They win some elections here and there. All right. Now, examples of parties today, third parties today, the Libertarian Party. You can see here that the Libertarian Party has the Statue of Liberty as their little logo. How about that? And you see it's got like a gold and purplish type of color to it. So the third parties ultimately, this one, They have the conservative economic principles and the liberal social values. They just don't want the government to get involved in anything. They feel like the less the government's involved in any activity, whether it's a social view or an economic view, the better off everyone will be. And then you also have the Green Party. They are based on protecting the environment. They're based on nonviolence, social justice, and equality. They have expanded their beliefs to go not just with the environment. You also notice that it's a clever little logo. It looks like a G, but it's also a leaf, and it's actually green. It's so precious. All right. So these third parties, look, third parties tend to get a little popular when people are displeased with the mainstream and when things aren't going well in the country, right? And I think right now would be a good example of where people, you might see membership for groups like the Libertarian Party and the Green Party might increase because people are not real happy about Democrats and Republicans. And one of the things that people have been frustrated with were the choices for president. People didn't necessarily like Joe Biden or Donald Trump. But remember, they're going to vote for one of those two guys because they feel like the third party candidates don't have a chance. All right. Now, let me show you some things about our good friends at the third party here. All right. And let's just look up Green Party. The Greens, gp.org. All right. Look at this. They are wonderful. And elections. So you can see their candidates. They show their candidates, office holders. Let's see who their office holders are across the country. Look at this. You see they've got somebody from the city council in California, a village trustee, a town meeting member. I don't even know what that is. School board. A lot of these are very localized. They don't win a lot of elections. Okay. But in some of these places, these are is a pretty big deal. Look, there's a mayor. I don't know who Bruce Delgado is, but he got voted in. Right. So you can scroll through these and you can see in particular what it is that these particular parties stand for. Okay. Now, their candidates aside, it shows you their election histories, their victories, the results in various races. Presidential elections, it doesn't go very well. Okay. And so they ask you in particular, like they have questionnaires that they want people to fill out just like other candidates do. And in particular, if you want to know what they want in a candidate, they're going to tell you, right? And if we go back and say, I don't want to look at the Green Party elections anymore. There we go. They'll tell you essentially what they stand for, their party platform. Okay. I love it. Look at this: democracy, social justice, ecology, and peace. And look, it's a little peace sign. Their party platform just as in depth as Democrats and Republicans, and maybe more so because they feel far more like they need to be clear on these issues, and so people will know exactly what it is that they're calling for. Political reform. Let's just take a quick peek. They want green solutions, electoral reform, enact proportional representation for legislative seats on the municipal, county, state levels. Look at that. Enact ranked voting, provide full public funding for all elections, free and equal radio and TV time for public candidates. Wow. Prohibit corporations from spending influence. They got a lot of things. Abolish the electoral college. These guys are so precious. Right? So you've got ways in which, look, they have beliefs on things that you should do for strengthening elections. And you don't have to agree with those, but they have ways of getting political reform enacted. They also want to get rid of corruption. Imagine that. Okay. And so ultimately, this is what the Green Party stands for. And by the way, they mentioned something else. I just happened to look at a glance at it. And hang on, I'll go back to it. Uh, Expand revolving door lobbying cooling off periods for members of Congress to their top staff to at least 2 years. They're like, hey, we need to end the revolving door and the lobbying industry, and that would be one of their main goals. So let's look at the Libertarian LP.org. How about that? Did you know there are more than 225 libertarians in elected office? That's so awesome, if you're a libertarian anyway. And so you see more news that they're involved with. And the Libertarian Party, let's see what they got. Here's their platform. You can learn more. And it's a PDF form, statement of principles, personal liberty, you have self-ownership, privacy, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can look at this, see what it is they stand for, all right? And they have a lot of ideas. And if you look at the party as a whole, I mean, let's see if they got anybody. You can also shop there and buy all their cool stuff. It's ironically not free. Libertarians, you know what I'm saying? Oh, look, they have things for sale for a lot of money. You can buy a pack of pens, tip cards. That's fun. I love it. I vape, I vote. People who are libertarians think you should be free to vape, and it's up to you. That if you want to, do that, it's up to you. And look, they have lapel pins of different kinds, and they have porcupine cufflinks. They kind of adopted the porcupine as their mascot. Like, you know how the donkey is the Democrats' mascot, and then you get the elephant. They like the porcupine because they're prickly and they don't want you to get near them. They just want to be left alone. So you can get a sterling silver necklace that says libertarian. If you pay $50 for that, I would just like to request that you buy me things. All right, look, that's all we got for parties at the moment. There's a couple assignments in your Schoology folder today, too. Make sure that you start thinking about a test. We're nearing the end of the outline, so we're shooting for Friday, maybe Monday for your test. Okay, if you got any questions, comments, shoot them my way.